independent clauses and dependent clauses. So this is round 2 of learning how to write with sentence variety. Round 1 was finding the subject and the verb. Round 3 will be learning the different types of sentences, but we're right smack in the middle, right, with phrases and clauses. So by the end of this lesson, you will know, if you don't already, what a phrase is, what a clause is, what an independent clause is, and what a dependent clause is. So let's start with the sentence. Do you remember what makes a sentence a sentence? It has two major pieces, two major parts of speech. If you recall, a sentence is a group of words with a subject and a verb. But this is also called an independent clause. So you may be wondering, what's the difference between an independent clause and a sentence? Well, not much, except for that a sentence is complete. It has expressed its full meaning. A clause still has more to tell. An independent clause is a group of words with a subject and a predicate that is not complete. Huh? Some of you may ask, or make that noise. Think of it like this. If I said James talked, that's all I wanted to say, then I'm done. And that's a sentence. But if I wanted to say James talked, but Lisa texted, then James talked is no longer a sentence, but an independent clause. An independent clause is a group of words that could be a sentence, but aren't because it's only a part of what is meant to be said or written. Look at this visual. This might help you understand the difference. They both have subjects and predicates, or subjects and verbs, but a sentence is complete and an independent clause is incomplete. So look at these sentences. Jimmy was hungry, so he ate donuts. So Jimmy was hungry could be a sentence, but because the writer wanted to also mention what he did about his hunger, it is incomplete. All right, so what about dependent clauses? Well, dependent clauses have subjects and verbs, but they depend on more information to be complete. For example, since I'm going to the store. All right, going is a verb. And then I am, or I, is the subject. All right, so am going would be the verb, I is the subject, so it has a subject and a verb. But it's not complete. It depends on more information to make sense. Like, what about since you're going to the store? So basically, independent clauses, all right, they are just, dependent clauses are just independent clauses with a white bus word attached to the front. Like this. It's the formula. Now you may be asking, what are white bus words? A white bus is an acronym for the words that turn independent clauses into dependent clauses. A white bus words are formally known as subordinate conjunctions. Here they are. So take the following independent clauses. Laura went to the store. I'm going to the rodeo. Lupita is not happy. These could all be sentences because they have subjects and verbs. They could stand alone. But notice what happens when I add a white bus word to them. So I'll say although. Although Laura went to the store. Let's say if I'm going to the rodeo. Because Lupita is not happy. Now what's happened is all of these clauses, independent clauses, are now dependent on more information, so they've become dependent clauses. And you will have to finish the sentence now by adding information after a comma. So you basically get rid of the period, you put a comma, and then you can fill in the missing information with an independent clause. And as we'll find out soon, that'll be called a complex sentence. But ultimately, all you gotta know is dependent clauses, okay? Dependent clauses, all right, are independent clauses with a white buswords on them, and it makes them depend on more information. They don't stand alone. So what about phrases? Okay, so phrases like clauses are meaningful groups of words. However, they differ in that they do not have a subject and verb. Phrases can have a subject or a verb, but never together. Because once that happens, you've got a clause. So remember, independent and dependent clauses, they have subjects and verbs. So anytime you have a subject and a verb, it couldn't be a phrase because it would change the definition of it to a clause. So here are some examples of some phrases. We learned that we've learned opening and delayed adjectives, and so we've learned how you can begin a sentence with an opening adjective or an opening adjective phrase, or you can also add delayed adjectives in the middle or the end, delayed adjectives or delayed adjective phrases. So what I've done is I've given you two examples. The first one has an example of an opening adjective phrase. Anxious to learn, Anna signed up for 2 more courses. So anxious to learn is an opening adjective because it describes Anna. Now, do you see a verb in there? There is not a verb. So there's also not going to be a subject. Anxious to learn would be a phrase. Now here's a delayed adjective phrase down here. Ben's face, worn and leathery from years of hard labor, was the last face I saw before I left. So worn and leathery from years of hard labor. That is a phrase that describes, an adjective phrase that describes Ben's face. And again, I look at it. Where's the verb? I don't see one. So there's not even a subject or a verb in this one, and actually both of these examples. So those are both phrases. But don't forget, a phrase could have a verb and it could have a subject. It just cannot have both. So as you can see, a phrase has a subject or a verb. A clause has a subject and a verb. That's the difference. They both are meaningful groups of words. So to distinguish between phrases dependent clauses and independent clauses, you just need to ask yourself some questions. First, is there a subject and a verb? If the answer is yes, it's a clause. And you'll have to ask another question. If the answer is no, it's a phrase. And the next question, does it begin with a white busword? The answer is yes. Now we're answering the second question because we've determined that it's a clause, right? So now we want to figure out, is it an independent clause or a dependent clause? So we ask, does it begin with a white busword? If the answer is yes, it's a dependent clause because it depends on more information to be complete. If the answer is no, it's an independent clause because it could stand alone as a sentence. So, I gave you this test a while back, and the reason you're probably watching this video right now is because you did not pass it. So, let's look at it, let's ask the questions, and let's see if we can figure out whether or not these examples are phrases, independent clauses, or dependent clauses. So all we're looking at are the words that are in all caps. So disturbingly quiet. I'm not even going to read the rest. All I'm going to read is just the words that are in all caps. So disturbingly quiet. Does that have a verb in it? Quiet. Do we know who or what is being quiet? Now remember, we're not looking at the rest of the sentence. We're only looking at what's all in caps. So if you get rid of everything else and you just focus on what's all in caps, then no, we don't know who or what is being quiet. So we have no subject. And that means that the answer is a phrase. Now this second part says disturbingly quiet. So again, let's just read and focus on the all caps. Sarah had large, somber eyes. Now, is there a subject and verb in that? The verb is had. Who or what is doing the having? Sarah. So yes. Does it start with a white bus word? No. It's an independent clause. See if you can try number 3. That looked out from a face she left unadorned every day. That looked out from a face she left unadorned every day. So on this one, we have a verb, looked out. Okay, there's looking. Who or what is doing the looking? Well, if we're only looking at the bold words, we have no idea. So it makes it a phrase. Then we get Gwydion sat upright. We get Gwydion sat upright. So it says tense as a bowstring. So all we're focusing on is tense as a bowstring. So on this one, tense as a bowstring, that's all we're going to focus on. Is there a verb? I do not see one. Is there a phrase? Is there a subject? No. So it has to be a phrase. And then finally, Gwydion